What creepy experience or story haunts you to this day? 30 years ago, I was lying in bed next to my husband about 1 a.m. I couldn't sleep because his snoring was incredibly loud. I noticed something shift at the edge of my bed, so started looking in that direction. Then, plain as effing day, two silhouettes with appearance of TV static were standing there. As I opened my eyes even wider, trying to make out what I was seeing, they instantly started bolting toward me, coming right through the bed. Not smooth movements either, but like in one movement, they were a foot closer, then another sudden movement. They advanced 2 or 3 feet closer, like bam, 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 each bam being another sudden movement closer, right at me. I started kicking, screaming, and swatting at them. My poor husband, LOL, jumped out of the bed, knocking everything off the side table, trying to wake up and react to whatever had me freaking out. I will never forget that shit. Same house. A couple of months later, I'm sitting in our infant's room around 2 a.m. after having finished a bottle. We're just kind of rocking in the dark when I start feeling like something was watching us from the corner of the room. I'm not a religious person, don't believe in God or the devil and stuff like that, so my rational brain was trying to talk me out of being scared when all of a sudden my son straightened right up, looked in the direction I was eyeballing, and happily goes, "Hi!" and started kicking his feet. Freaked me TF out. 2 weeks later, my husband was out of town. At this point, I'm a little afraid of being alone in our apartment, so I started staying up late. Afraid to go to bed alone. It was 3 o'clock a.m. I turned the TV off and set off for my bedroom. Once I got to the end of the hall, the TV turned back on. I kept telling myself I probably set the remote against something, so went back to the living room to turn it off again, but nope. The remote was sitting securely on the table where I left it. I turned every light on in that apartment and slept that way until my husband returned. We started making arrangements to move that week, and I've never had another experience since. When I was little, I had a dream where I was walking through a creepy old building, and when I came around the corner in red paint or blood, there was this message that said, "Welcome to the Death Factory." And I woke up. I didn't remember the rest of the dream, nor the context, but I was sweating and freaked out, and I told my mom when she came in to see what was wrong in the middle of the night. As a kid, I never watched the news, though it was on the TV while dinner was getting prepared. The following night, on the news, there was a story about something, and then boom, up comes a shot of something on the news, and in red on a wall, there is a message, "Welcome to the Death Factory." And I screamed, and my mom bolted in. I said, "That was from my dream." She stared at the TV, seemed freaked out too, then just said, "It's something I must have saw before." But I hadn't, except in my dream. I have had other blips of what I would call premonitions, though the context of them are not clear when they happen. A very brief example, for months I was stuck on the idea, in my office building, that I'd have to know how to get out in case there was a fire and the ceiling collapsed and walls were all wrong. I got to know the fire evacuation routes really well and counted desks to the main aisle in case I had to crawl, etc. Then September 11th happened. I don't live in NY or anything, but it was weird and creeps me out. The compulsion to prepare for a disaster was overwhelming. Similar thing in late 2019, I started to marvel at how we had so much at our fingertips in the grocery store whenever desired. I wondered what I would pick if this convenience was upended and I couldn't get anything reliably and shelves were just empty, so I bought up some stuff in small amounts over time. Then, March 2020, I was staring at empty shelves and unavailable items in absolute disbelief. 2 years back, we had a series of weird events that made me seriously consider to contact paranormal investigators. It all started when the teenage daughter of friends stayed the night here. She and my girlfriend wanted to watch a horror movie. I felt like the movie was too scary for her age. Later that evening, when we were laying in bed, we heard a knocking on our bedroom door. We assumed it was the girl for who the horror movie was too scary. But when my girlfriend went to open the bedroom door, the hallway was empty, and the girl was asleep in her room. This has happened multiple times. But also, other weird things have happened. Some might have other explanations, so I don't necessarily blame Casper for them. Tap running, things falling without being touched. But 2 incidents are definitely sticking with me. 1. I saw my girlfriend's sister enter the house before me, but when I entered, she and my girlfriend entered the house again after me. She hadn't been inside yet I didn't know she was at our place and she was wearing the same clothes I had seen her wear a moment earlier. 2. I was in the bathroom and heard noise from one of the bedrooms. I assumed it was my girlfriend. I asked her a question. She answered. Later, I went down and she was sitting at the dining table. When I mentioned the question, she didn't know what I was talking about. She hadn't been upstairs. I got to say, I think a good year has passed since the last incident, so I think we are in the clear. But I seriously considered contacting paranormal investigators for this. I have several. Here's some of my favorites. I used to live mostly alone on a mountain with my grandparents. I didn't move away until I was 25. Our property bordered the Cherokee National Forest in East Tennessee. That mountain was a paranormal hotspot, weird lights in the woods, noises, strange moving shadows, the works. Later found out from the literal witch living at the base of the mountain, there is an energy vortex there. If you believe in that, I do through experience. Apparently, the local pagan community knows it well enough. I had the same reoccurring nightmare for 6 years. I would wake up, feel like something is off. Look at my bedroom door, there would be something standing in it. Sometimes it would look like someone I knew, but just wrong somehow. In a blur, it would rush me. My vision would go gray, I would barely be able to move, whole body would feel like static, and I would hear something like a cross between the inside of a tornado, a waterfall, and hundreds of screaming voices. Then I'd snap awake. Sometimes right back into the start of the same nightmare 4 or 5 times before it would stop. I've had sleep paralysis before this was different. I started sleeping during the day because this would only happen at night. And speaking of being up at night, I was awake at around 4 a.m. It was storming outside. I was chilling playing EVE Online when the phone, landline, starts ringing. I have one in my room, one in my folks' room, and one in the living room. I let it ring for a min. Finally, I pick it up as soon as I do. I feel something standing directly behind me, over the phone. It sounds like someone trying to talk while dunking the receiver in a bucket of water. After a solid 3 minutes of listening, trying to make out anything and panicking because something is behind me. In a closed room, the line just goes dead, and whatever is behind me disappears completely. One time I was out walking in the forest, because frankly, this was the early 2000s, and we still only had dial-up, so life was boring, on a path I knew very well when I walked into a clearing I didn't remember seeing before. There were a few very small trees 10 to 15 feet spaced far apart, still completely green-leafed even though it was early fall. Ground was completely clear of leaves and covered in moss. I could not hear birds or wildlife anymore, and there was an almost overwhelming sense of wanting to sit down and just stay there, but I headed home because it was getting late, and those woods are not pleasant to be in at night. It was also the only place in that forest I had ever been that didn't feel like I was being followed at all times. Left to go back the next day, and no matter how many times I retraced my steps, I never saw it again. That place was active day or night. If you wandered out in the woods even in the middle of the day, you would still feel like something was standing behind you at all times. When I was a kid, my family lived in a house that had a lot of military people moving in and out, but was only a decade or 2 old at the time. After a month or 2 of living there, my bedroom became very cold, and suddenly I developed paranoia. I had never felt paranoid before, but due to my age, my parents assumed it was just a weird kid thing. I started sleeping on the couch downstairs instead of my room because it felt uncomfortable. After I switched to the couch, The TV we had would stop emitting sound altogether at random times and would turn on in the middle of the night. So I went back to my room. I woke up in the middle of the night, freezing, to see that my comforter was folded at my feet, not kicked off. I looked ahead, and at the end of my bed was a middle-aged male figure who was wearing a military uniform and was clearly watching me sleep. I flipped out, and the figure disappeared down the hallway. We ended up moving out of the house, and my paranoia went away, and I could sleep in my bed again. When I was a kid in elementary school, I had one best friend. We'll call him Jim. We were pretty much inseparable and spent a ton of time at each other's houses. I loved when he came to my house. We'd play in my giant sandbox, or with my train set downstairs, or build snow forts in the winter. It was a blast. I wasn't as thrilled to go to his house, however. His mom was an absolute angel, soft-spoken, incredibly kind, and she often took us fun places, water parks, toy store, museums, etc. They even had a pool. What made me apprehensive was his dad. He was a complete 180 from Jim's mom, really tall, well over 6 feet, perpetually grumpy, and had a booming bass voice that you could feel in the air when he spoke. He intimidated the living shit out of all the neighborhood kids that came over to Jim's house, including me. A good example of his ability to instill maximum fear simply by existing. I'd be over at Jim's house, walking down the hall to use their bathroom, and his dad would appear, coming from the opposite direction. He loomed over me like a giant, so I usually did my best to cower and try to be invisible as he went by. On more than one occasion, just as I was about to pass him, he spun on me and got right in my face, yelling, "What are you doing?" I'd stammer out that I had intended to use the bathroom, but no longer needed to since I'd pissed my pants. He'd straighten back up and continue walking, laughing to himself as he went. In hindsight, I think he knew he scared the hell out of us and enjoyed it. That being the case, I quickly learned to recognize the sound of his truck when he came home. I'd run to Jim's room and wouldn't come out until it was time to go home. The other thing that was scary as hell, Jim's dad and mom got into loud arguments all the time. I have to give her credit. Jim's mom would get right back in his face and not back down an inch. Still, anytime we'd hear them shouting from the other room, we both worried that we'd get it from Jim's dad for some unknown reason. To the best of my knowledge, nothing ever became physical, but oh man, the racket they made when they'd go at each other. Once, during the summer when we were all playing around the pool, he approached me from behind, lifted me up, and tossed me into the deep end of the pool. I couldn't swim. I thrashed around wildly and was about to drown when Jim's mom dove in and pulled me out, giving her husband a nasty look. He just laughed to himself and wandered off. One winter day, Jim and I and his sister were out sledding in the backyard, and the zipper of my snowsuit came off the track. I went inside and told Jim's mom, who told me his dad would fix it. I tried to say no, it's okay, but she was already calling down the stairs to him. The booming response from the basement, "Send him down." I went down those stairs as if I was living my final moments, all shaky and scared. There were almost no lights in the basement, just a single bulb hanging from a string in the workroom where he was located. "Come here," he boomed. I nervously stepped over, and he bent down on one knee to take a look at the zipper. Even then, he was still 3 feet taller than I was. He stood and walked over to his bench, returning with a pair of needle-nose pliers. He put the wayward zipper back on its track, then bent so he was almost nose to nose with me. I was petrified. He took the pair of pliers, opened them up, and placed them on my nose, then gave them a little bit of pressure. Just enough to where it almost hurt, but not quite. Then he removed them, stood, and chuckled like he always did. I must have done 140 miles per hour running up the stairs and back outside. As a little kid, I'd never been more terrified. Fast forward to age 15 to 16, my folks and I had long since moved out of the area, and Jim and I hadn't spoken since about the 4th grade. My parents informed me that Jim's dad had been put on the predator list for having underage child content on his home computer. They asked me if anything funny had ever happened during my time at Jim's house as a kid. I immediately recalled the nose pliers situation, and a chill went up my spine like you wouldn't believe. Thankfully, I wasn't a victim, but my blood ran cold when they told me that. I was about 16, and it was after school. My dad was in the garden watering the plants, and I noticed from my bedroom window a very dodgy-looking stranger walk into the yard and telling my dad he was looking for a John James, etc., to which my dad corrected him, Jason. So my dad said to go ask for me at the door. Man gets to the front door, security gate and door wide open, and knocks. Something feels off. I go to see, and this man scared the daylights out of me. He was dirty and came across incredibly creepy, and for some reason I felt like I had seen him before. He said, "Jason?" To which I frighteningly answered, "Yes?" He responds, "I'm here to have sex with you," with a creepy smile. The way my heart left my chest and a cold shiver ran down my spine. I reached for the security gate, shut it, and locked up and muttered, "I don't know what the hell you are talking about, please leave." And he laughed eerily and left. I was mortified. His behavior, body language, etc. was just super chilling. Remember I mentioned I felt like I had seen him before? Well, I had. My friends too. We saw him a few days later amongst the homeless people who were squatting behind the local KFC. Still to this day, I wish I knew what the hell that was about. Did some idiot kids at my school put him up to it? Guess I'll never know.